Here we are on another VlE series game. This is Eckmühl. Eckmühl is a battle from the 1809 campaign. I haven't played anything except maybe some minis about it before. I had to pick this up because it's a Zor Wish, and since I'm doing the VlE stuff, I figured I'd catch this one as well. As you can see, it shares a lot of similarity in appearance with the other AWE game Friedland, and it shares the same kinds of, the counters are just a little different than the more modern games of the series. Of course, the printing job is AWE standard. In this one, unlike Friedland, we have blank counters for both sides, which I can use as aide-de-camps. I'm going to leave out a couple of the options, as I usually do. I'm definitely leaving out the event chits. I just don't like them. Well, I don't know that I don't like them. I think they're kind of cool and conceptually, but in terms of remembering to play them or whatever, I just couldn't do it. Unlike in Friedland, there's no Ford chit, so there's no real reason for me to be pulling them at all. There's nothing except, you know, the little things that allow you to fudge combat a little bit. And, you know, like the special chits in the Stonewall Sword game that I handled relatively recently in American Civil War game, obviously. I'm trying to see if I can see it, but like that, I just don't have this tremendous desire to play with this kind of stuff. CWB series, somebody made a bunch of random events charts for some of the older games, and those two I'm just not that interested in. You know, the base system is pretty good. Yes, there are things you can't cover maybe with the base system, but I'm just not feeling, I feel like the die rolls are random enough that I don't really need to throw in a bunch of random events, especially when they're mechanically difficult for me to handle in a solo game, because I have to, you know, play it more like a CDG where I have to try to remember what everybody has. And the system is difficult enough because of the sort of ad hoc nature of the rules where, you know, you create your own game. And since I've been away from the series for a little while, a month or so, it's again, I'm struggling to kind of grasp what's going on. I don't know what it is about this series, but when I hit my stride in it, and I'm enjoying it fine, but it's very hard for me to remember what my stride is. And again, I think that's the ad hoc nature. So what do we got with this battle? Well, this is a situation where the Austrians essentially are trying to withdraw. They're severely outnumbered, and they're trying to fall back to the Aspern, Essling, Wagram battles. In terms of the actual deployment, well, I've got two Austrian corps, one here, I believe. There's a reserve corps too, which is coming in. Now, like the other game in the series that I have, there's some optional units that, you know, you can play with. Hey, I give you a couple victory points and I get this, or you get this penalty or whatever. We have some reinforcements coming in. Turns 1, I think, is all of this for the French. 4, and then turn 5, both sides get some units. I think I have an old S&T game on this. Well, not that old. From, I don't know if it's DG or 3W era. They did a series of kind of Napoleon at Waterloo style games, with a little bit of extra chrome to them. And I thought they were kind of neat, and decided I would pick them up. There were a few on Archduke Charles versus Napoleon, and I think Eckmühl is one of them. I haven't played it yet, so that is an issue here. There's some special rules in this one. First of all, lines of communication. The Austrians this way, the French this way. It's actually both borders of the map, so the French are west and south. The French have special command rules, but they're not really... So it looks to me like what's intended is Davout is the army commander until Napoleon shows up. On the turn Napoleon shows up, both he and Napoleon are army commander. And then Davout is allowed to do whatever the hell he likes. And as army commander and corps commander, he doesn't have to give himself orders or whatnot. I don't really like that concept. I like the idea that he just gives himself orders. He'll follow them and implement them as immediately as he can, but I want to put the same delays in place because he's got to get his units moving and everything. So whatever's there is supposed to be there. Now, what's weird here is you have Lannes getting a provisional corps, which is made up of some of Davout's force, and they're not represented on here entirely correctly. Like, this is Lannes, and this is Lannes. And that wasn't clear to me that these little lines mean that. When the 2nd Division is under Davout, and it's all Davout's corps. It's just, it's being split in half. So Davout has this to begin with. Lannes comes in, I don't know, on turn 4 or whatever, and he can scoop these guys up, who really are kind of out of command. I wouldn't disparage if Davout runs over and grabs them, but as of right now, they're the reserve, and I really don't think I should be grabbing them. What else? And there are some kind of cross-attached units. Now that comes to one issue. I haven't set it up yet, but there's no army morale in this one. There's corps morale, which is what the later rules certainly take as more than normal, even though I don't think we saw it. We maybe saw it in one of the Spanish battles. Anyway, the French are divided up into their 3 corps, including the provisional division of Davout's corps. Lannes' Cav attachment is completely immune to demoralization. I'm going to track fatigue for all of these and probably grumble about Cav fatigue some more because there are Cav units kind of integrated into the command. The Austrians are divided into 3 corps, and they use kind of normal orders here. In both cases, we have an army commander. It's just the French one doesn't show up early. My initial orders for the Austrians, pretty much I just left them blank. It's hold the ground, you know. They're not allowed to withdraw or retreat. So, well, what else am I going to do? I don't know. I could advance, but I'm in some pretty good terrain here with some hills and such not, and I don't think I have the wherewithal to launch some sort of attack, especially since Lefebvre is coming in down here, I believe. No, Vendôme's coming in down there. Lefebvre's coming in up here. So, anyway, each corps has its own number of steps that it takes losses, and that's going to be kind of complex, especially once they start intermingling. The victory level is, well, it's balanced in the sense of, hey, you know, I have to get 10 points to win a marginal victory, whichever side I am. But it's not balanced in the sense that, I'm going to need my rock, I can feel a wind coming. In the sense that different people get different points for things. So the French get a half point for each Austrian step they kill, but they get a victory point for each Austrian step, or for each French step that they get off of here, and it's got to be that road. They get 10 points for killing Austrian leaders, 20 points for Charles. The Austrians get 1 point for killing each French step. So that's the big difference, is the French really want to get moving quickly, and losses are going to hurt them more. Theoretically, losses would probably hurt the Austrians more because they have a smaller army. But they do have a reserve in the background. They have another army. So if they can create enough losses for the French, they may blunt the advance, and I guess that's the concept behind here. 10 points for each French leader that's killed. And then Napoleon If you kill Napoleon, well, this campaign becomes stupid. Probably France is collapsing, so the French just lose the game. And that's pretty common in the scenarios for this game. Losing Napoleon pretty much fails you completely, and it's a strong disincentive to getting Napoleon anywhere near the front. There's some historical options here, or some historical results here. In terms of errata, it looks like there's a lot less here. What's missing is there's no printed copy of the map. As with the last one, I'm going to use the most recent rules. There's a little bit of problem with that. I got to kind of integrate the two terrain charts because there's terrains in here that aren't in the other one. But the more modern game has what I think is more accurate handling of terrain, and I think more accurate assessment of a lot of things. The rules just have been refined a little bit. There's a lot of small things that, like, I think improve both the play and also the accuracy of the simulation. So I think we're going to actually start tomorrow. I've written out my French orders as to what they're going to do. I'll probably worry about orders as new units come in, because I don't want to write them that far ahead of time. Or I'll have the army leader dispatch orders. But yeah, anyway, we'll see how this one works. As I begin the French movement pushing forward, and unfortunately I kind of forgot there were French units coming on as reinforcements, so I handled the one fire combat up here and nothing happened, of course, because it's in the woods. Melee in the woods, in fact combat in the woods in general, comes down to largely numbers, although the fire combat is kind of a luck-based thing. That's not going to have a lot of effect. What's going to have effect is when one person hits the other with melee, with more than one unit hitting one enemy unit. And the Austrians are actually going to have the first option on that, being, you know, the receivers here. They could conceivably move forward and perform an attack. Otherwise, the numbers of the French are just going to end up getting some fairly high odds over on the melee table. But the problem that came up is when I started bringing Vendôme in here, I decided to try to risk attacking the flank of the town. Now that was protected by the cav. The cav countercharged. It was a 1-to-1 battle, no mods. Die roll. Hey, it came out a little ahead for the Austrians. They break the French unit. It's now disordered. The problem is, this is my line of communications. These two units retreat off the map and are destroyed. My two biggest units from Vendôme. There's no special rules in the scenario to handle this case. The base rules are, hey, you retreat off the map, you know, involuntarily like that, you're not coming back, and you just destroyed units. So that's a significant blow. I don't know if that was the intention here. It's a fairly unlikely circumstance, the cav at a 1-to-1 breaking both French units, so it could stick around and patrol. It hit another set of French units, broke one of the two, did some damage. But now Vendôme is down 15 strength points out of 20 that he has in his unit. Basically, he's not going to be able to continue being a particularly effective force once he clears this space. And I had some pretty intense plans for him. He was supposed to move his way up the road to the exit and just kind of blast through everything and be the point unit. Well, that's not likely going to happen after this. You know, if the map was just a little bigger, he'd have room to try to rally those units at some point. And I think there's a real problem with this system in terms of handling units coming on the map right near the enemy. But actually, any fighting right near the edge of the map is troublesome. And there's a lot of games that have that kind of instance. The small maps on these games, though, make it very likely to happen. we'll continue. We have Lon, I think, is it coming on? I don't know. I can't find what's going on. Who's here? No, the Feb is coming on with a pretty big force. It does not come on the road. He comes on around hex C, so we can see his force moving forward. He's got some cav support, so he's not going to have any kind of real problem with the cav just being able to brush his infantry aside the way Van Damme did. He has no cav here, which is why one puny little unit could take him out. Things just got worse for him. So I decided to leave the Austrians facing this way rather than reposition them, which would have been kind of a cheat, but I didn't really realize exactly where the French were coming in when I set up the Austrians. I didn't think too carefully about it. I thought, well, they'll be advancing this way. Nah, they're coming up the road. Which might have made sense to set up here instead and shoot them as they're coming in, all kind of crap like that. So this would be a tough fight, no matter what, coming in through this road. Maybe the best thing the French could do is pull back, form up, and attack, because they can't form up back here. Were they to, they'd be marching forward this way. And of course, there could have been a better defense with the Austrian cav more forward. I didn't want to do that because I didn't know precisely what I was facing, stuff like that. So I set up kind of the safest defense, and it worked pretty well. The infantry got a plink, which routed the artillery that I unlimbered in front of it. A risky move, but I felt like I needed to take that. Ended up disordering another unit off the map, and at this point, Van Damme is actually at his broken morale, which means at the end of the turn, all these units might leave the map, and we might just lose that entire command. That's pretty damn impressive. Those are 1 point each for victory points. Austrian turn. We're pulling back a little bit behind the river line. I don't know how much I really like facing the village, but it seems better. We're able to, because there's space here, we were able to pop out some more skirmishers, which means we do get a slight advantage, some firepower. So it wasn't just like our skirmishers got brushed aside. If you don't brush those skirmishers, if you brush those skirmishers aside and don't fill the gap with your real units, you take a penalty. It's fairly easy to brush skirmishers aside just by using your own skirmishers on an advance. There are some exceptions to that if you've already knocked out your skirmisher or whatever, brushing a different one aside, and then you have to take some fire. But here, because we didn't advance, we do take some fire. So they have some effect, but it's not much in this system. Moving some of Hohenzollern up here. Let's send Charles to go do something. And then Van Damme's command at the end of the turn, and I'm not sure, I think these should actually be assessed at the end of each player turn instead of the end of the whole turn, as to whether or not a unit breaks. Just because if you do it at the end of a turn, a set of player turns, you create something that is artificial, more artificial than the normal play order, in the sense that you're creating a difference between the French player turn and the Austrian player turn. And I'm not sure, you know. It probably assess them both at the end of each player turn or something like that would be the wisest. I've been assessing it at the end of the complete turn. The rules are, even in the most recent version, are ambiguous about it at best. But Van Damme's unit took its hit, and we lost, I think, 2 more units due to that. Right now we have an infantry regiment and an artillery unit that is getting chewed up by counter battery fire and can't fire back because the crew left. So yeah, he's pretty much wiped out, and that's a lot of victory points because they all count as destroyed. So I don't see how the French can win if this was closely balanced to begin with because of this. And I'm not sure the French, I think the French order should be to get the hell out away from this edge of the map, which is just so artificial. believe I can kind of justify what happened in a hand-wavy sort of way. I'm really good at doing this, you know. I was able to justify 1830s stock market, and then, you know, 56s, and then I started realizing, wait a minute, they both have their flaws, and they try to address them, but neither one is applicable. Well, here, you know, I can do that with, all right, well, you know, Van Damme's coming on the board. The battle hasn't really started, and he's driven off by fierce resistance, and maybe he's not, even though he's in sight of this huge force moving forward, maybe he's not really aware that this is, you know, the coordinated attack that it has to be. And he's going to pull back and wait for another day or whatever. I'm not sure that makes sense that it would assess the casualties against the French in terms of victory. I feel like that's another little problem. Obviously, you could house rule this and saying, well, look, this is just goofy, or you could house rule the victory points coming from it, or whatever. But unfortunately, and this is something I've seen with other games in this series, nothing quite to this degree, I guess, but it seems like a lot of the consideration and playtesting that goes into a lot of other finished products doesn't really apply to this series. You know, yeah, I just don't feel like this would have happened. Something like this would have happened in like 10 plays of this game. So somebody should have said, hey, you know, this is a little weird, and you would have expected some kind of designer input on that. And even in the more modern ones, there are things where I can't believe that it got through. Especially, so this was produced under Azure Wish, who I don't know whether or not they play tested their stuff at all, but they certainly didn't really try to nail down the rules and get all the special cases down. But when you get to Legion, I would have expected that, and that's the most recent Quatre Bataille. I would have expected a little bit more. Hey, come on, you can't get away with this. Some of the setups and stuff for there, it's all in the Vive l'Empire series spirit, though, which is to say, like with A World at War, which has its own little community, the decision may have been made, look, we don't want to try to expand anything, we just want to make sure that we can keep our claws in the few people who actually play this. Unlike A World at War, though, I don't think this series has that big a following. A World at War has a very devoted, you know, previous to A World at War, going back to the Advanced Third Reich days. Not Third Reich, because there's a huge shift when you move from Third Reich to A3R in terms of the people willing to play it. A3R just, you know, the people who used to play Third Reich maybe gave it a try or whatever, but you got maybe 5% of the population that could play, that enjoyed Third Reich going onward. But I think that stayed still a fairly large core population. Here, geez, man, you know, these don't have that kind of big name recognition. You look over on Board Game Geek or whatever, these games get played by a couple of people. So I don't think that there's any real need to try to preserve the integrity of the system all that carefully. And I think more work towards nailing down and getting the rules correct and specific in the later versions would have made more sense. And not just correct, but, you know, just more clearly stated, and especially the scenarios, getting them aligned so that they work under every configuration that the game's supposed to present. Anyway, going off on a tangent, but you know, there aren't going to be a lot of people who are watching this who didn't watch some of the others in this series, so, and even out of those, there probably aren't a hell of a lot. Here, Van Damme tried to roll a, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, this sucks, attempt. Now, like Friedland, this earlier incarnation gives higher values to initiative than to accepting orders, and the rules are basically the same. It's just the numbers are different for some reason. Maybe there was a screw up. Anyway, for Van Damme, that's not a big deal. He's got 4s in either. But he ended up rolling a failure, which means he has a -2 to his morale checks. I can call off the attack. I can cancel what I'm doing, I guess. But I can't go do something else. It's a fairly short battle, especially painful to pick up, you know, a game in this series. Worked so hard to get it, expense-wise, time-wise, effort in terms of picking this one up. And it's only a 10 turn between noon and 4:30. Anyway, for the French actions, Davout has largely cleared out the units in the woods, just that preponderance of units. He got lucky with some fire combat, driving one unit back and then meleeed the hell out of another unit. And then over here he also drove another unit back. So he's getting, you know, some traction on his side. Meanwhile, VlE is moving up. He's going to be pivoting and trying to go over the hill. And Eckmühl is going to be a pain in the butt for him, though. Maybe we can do without Vandamme here. And so that's the end of, I guess, the French player turn. Now, if I'm being clever, what I would do is I'd count up losses on other units to see, hey, have they reached their loss limits? I know they haven't, but at some point I'm going to have to start tracking that a little bit more carefully. The Austrians pulling back a little bit where we can. Obviously fatigue costs for that, but Charles is going off to have a chit-chat with Roseburg, I believe, and we'll see if he can get those guys moving. It's not going to be next turn, but, you know, it's not clear that I really want to move yet, but there are some definite problems here. I probably deployed too far forward. I had the option of either of these villages. If I had taken this one, I could be moving forward instead of falling back within my command sphere. Right now I've got a fairly nice line from Eckmühl moving up here, but there's a big defect right here, and I don't have much that I can fill it with the orders that I have. Well, I don't really have orders, so I could probably throw a couple of units up here, the guys who are moving into place, that I don't see any real reason why I can't. And if I end up driving Vandamme off, I could actually pack these guys up and send them up too, so there's some more reinforcements. Push the French into position. Davout getting to punch his way through here. Lefebvre heading up. He's got some danger because he's got this cav massing here, and there's artillery here. And no, we can't get that close. We don't want to get any closer to these guns, because if we get closer to these guns, we'll give them an opportunity to fire that I don't want. Or if we move out of this hex. Now, I did think a little bit about the Vandamme situation and why this early version of the system probably allows for higher initiative versus obedience. Well, obedience is almost guaranteed to give you a success. It just might come with a delay. Initiative comes with a penalty no matter what in terms of this thing. And if you fail, you get nothing out of it. So there's a reasonable argument to be made for the numbers that are chosen here. Of course, for whatever reason, and probably fairly intuitive ones, the decision was made to kind of reverse those numbers and make it so that it's more likely to succeed at obedience. But I'm kind of leaning towards the older version for those. Nothing I can really do except tinker and play with numbers in the newer games, which I probably won't do. Which are rather roughly handled over here, Lefebvre's forces. This is not a very good French army. There's a lot of sevens, which is much lower than what you have at Friedland. This is an army that, you know, could lose Wagram, right? Conceivably, or at least Aspern, Essling. Over here, though, Davout is doing a pretty good number. He's driven off these guys. This stuff is in real danger. I've got skirmishers firing on the cav, and you know, I was afraid to try to withdraw the cav because it has to make a morale check. But there's some risk there, and not really a lot of opportunity for charging because of the river line. So I'm not getting a lot of traction. That artillery finally got knocked out of the way. Entering 130 here, and Lefebvre is further smashed up. However, Austrians failed to rally this, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're out of range at this point. Charles could go do it. Charles did finally make it over to Roseburg to try to make command. Now, these guys conceivably probably could have gone right off the board there, but I have this funky little algorithm for determining retreats that is kind of based on a combination of factors, one of which is easiest path of retreat. So I'm not going to go through the woods if there's a clear path going in the correct direction, more or less, away from the enemy somewhere else. So, you know, I'm fudging a little bit, I guess, but it makes sense to me. Looks like this hill is going to be a pain in the butt to take, but as Davout comes across, I mean, there's nothing here that can stop him. There's potential rally next turn, but things are slow. Austrian army is becoming fatigued. This is turn 4, so most of the rest of the French reinforcements, Lannes semi-corps, is going to come in at that point. And then the turn after, we see the Austrian reserve and Napoleon come on the board. It's like somehow, and some of this has to do with how hard these instructions are for me to follow, because they're by unit number all divided up. But somehow I think I assigned the 1st Division to Davout. And in fact, he has everything except the 3rd and the cav, which means that there's an extra French division on the board early in the game that I played. That may explain why he was able to pound through as hard as he did, because now I'm bringing Lannes in, and I find he's only got the 3rd division and the cav with him. Wait, what's this? We had some jumbling. That looks like part of the 3rd division. Okay. And I'm really a little confused by that. What's Nappy coming in with here? Nappy's coming in... Oh no, Nappy's got the 1st division here. Oh, okay. So you have all of it? Yeah, so I did not screw up. It's just that Lannes doesn't have it at the beginning. It comes in next turn. Now, this does hit me in one place. This was a surprise reinforcements thing. This is something that happens to me in this game. It's because the tendency for units to be set... I had it in another one. Units to be set up kind of where I wouldn't expect there to be a fight, right near the edge of the map, just like these guys were. Well, Lannes comes in here, and the 5 axis east, with Vendôme being completely destroyed, trying to come in that way. Now I have to bring Lannes in this way. Of course, he's surprising the Austrians. They thought they had cleared the path there, so it might go better, but it might not. No idea. One positive, though, is that the cav has not recovered, so we're not going to see that. Plus, Lannes has cav with him. The French cav in this game has been really kind of problematic. I have it in the center where the terrain's kind of the worst, and I haven't gotten any traction. Davout has no cav, and he's facing a little bit and could really use some, both for driving that off, but also he might be able to, he has space to maneuver cav, and he might be able to chase down some of that crap. But no. Anyway, I'll write some rules up for Lannes, and he'll be coming in up this way. And for the French turn, first thing, Lefebvre decided to call off his attack largely. He's keeping units here. This isn't an advanced condition, it's just, hey, I'm still here. These guys fell back to the river line where they can set up their artillery and try to recover. Davout sent him some orders. Napoleon's not on the map. Remember, even on the turn when Napoleon shows up, Davout still counts as army commander for that turn as well as Napoleon. Davout's forces have swamped and knocked out the artillery that was here. They routed a few units. Over here, you know, this is not easy. Towns aren't, you know, it looks like a flank. It's not. It's a town. So towns aren't easy to take out. And with all those forces, yeah, I have a lot of firepower going in there, and I'll eventually dissolve it. I play with an option where units can rout out of a village, so it's not quite as indomitable as it appears, but it really is. This is a 9 morale unit. I need to roll a 12 to get it out of there, so that's pretty tough anyhow. The Cav is setting itself up to charge these guys if, I don't know, if they want. It doesn't really make much difference there. The big thing is I have to clear the pathway because I've got orders after I clear this to head, and I don't know why after I clear, but to head up this way and support an attack on Eckmühl. I'm planning on Lefebvre taking another crack at it. I don't have a lot of time. This game, with its half-hour turns at the regimental level, it goes along so quickly, you know, that I really have to work to start getting some units off that edge. But there's a limit to what a unit can do, especially with the fatigue rules, and I need Lefebvre to recover some of that. In fact, poor old Davout has already got his fatigue penalty because he did some melees earlier in the game, and it's one thing that's keeping me from doing them again is, wow, I won't have much of an effective force. If I can take the hill out, then Davout can rest for a little bit, I think. If I can't, well, then he has to rest for a little bit, right? I guess that's about it. But the turns are getting meatier now. What had felt like kind of more of a skirmish is really beginning to feel more like a battle in this system with the amount of engagement that's going on. Okay, speaking of the, a little earlier, of the kind of surprise move into here, you know, to some extent, this is something that just happens, not just in games, but in battles. Sometimes forces do appear out of not where you expect them. Now, I had the force alignment correct. I found out that I have the divisions where they belong, but not being aware that somebody's going to come in at a certain place is not that big a deal. As long as there's some space between where you're likely to be and the edge of the map. The problem here is that they appeared out of nowhere. I had no warning. Now, it isn't turning out too badly, but this artillery, you know, is going to suffer some fire that maybe I don't want it to, that it probably shouldn't have to suffer. As the 130 turn goes by, Rosenberg's at like 28 losses total, including his disordered units. We had some more routed units leave the board here. These guys are about ready to head off too. He's pretty much destroyed. I gave him some orders, and now Charles is heading down to try to get some orders over to, what is it, Hohenzollern. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with him. These orders aren't in effect yet. There's always a one-turn delay. Minimum. The question is whether initiative includes that one-turn delay, and so far I've required that. That's he's got orders coming to him. I don't know what they are yet. He'll resolve them next turn. There's again going to be at least a one-turn delay on them, but things don't look too good for the Austrians. But the French have taken a lot of losses. That's mainly from Vendôme here, getting just hosed by the edge of the board. All right, Nappy's in the house now. Some Cav chased away that last little bit of the Austrian cav that caused so much trouble. Over here, Rosenberg has been crushed. His army reached its limit, and there isn't a lot left that wasn't undisordered anyway, or whatever, but some of it routed. We got some guns exposed here now. Just not a good situation. Everything's running. I don't think there's anything that's not. The units... Whoa, this is Rosenberg. Wow, I didn't realize that. These extra units that were back here seem to have been Rosenberg's command, so I did not check these guys. Alright, those guns go. What's under them does not. So, what's under them is 4th Corps. Remember, I'm playing with the option where if artillery runs, it leaves the guns behind. So that's what's happening there. I wonder if I have anything else kind of intermingled. It's hard to tell. I didn't realize those were Rosenberg units. I thought they were Hohenzollerns. We should be getting our reinforcements. They come in here just in time to try to patch the hole, because the hole is definitely there. Hill F isn't conquered yet, but I can't see being able to hold it. I'm actually considering, trying to pull back from it, just because those units that are exposed are in real trouble. Luckily, the French don't have any cav over here. Their cav's back here and has not engaged. On my Austrian turn, not even really a chance to recover anything. So we're just performing the route. More units streaming off the board. There's one that's going to go soon. However, Liechtenstein is coming up and trying to bottle up that hole. I haven't done a count. I already know Rosenberg's gone. This is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe. I think I got some numbers, some units screwed up. It's hard to read these numbers, just like in a lot of them. I had an easier time sometimes, but some of them are cut off. So you can see like this. Some of them are harder to read because of that. That's a common AWE problem with not getting the counters cut perfectly. This game, this series has not been too badly affected by it. Things like Europa Universalis have some real problems with their units. I have no idea what they are. Luckily, there's some online resources and stuff. But yeah, so what did I have? I had like 7. This needs 6 more hits to be gone. This, I think, is actually 4th Corps. So I don't think there's 6 more hits amongst the units from the 3rd Corps out there, which kind of confuses me. There's not a lot left of it. Especially since I found some 4th Corps units. Maybe those aren't supposed. Maybe those are temporarily assigned or something, because I know things are kind of weird in this scenario. But now they're streaming back to defend, because that's what I want to do. But yeah, that force by Liechtenstein might just end the French's ability to move forward and take any kind of advance on that road. I've used half the game already, and doing that to just come and smash one corps worth of opposition out of my way. Now another corps is going to set up in my way, and it's fresh. On the other hand, points aren't just for leaving the board. So if my losses for the French are significantly less, now they're not because of Van Damme. He took so many hits, that's going to hurt a lot. But otherwise, they're pretty good if it weren't for the damn edge of the map and some lucky shots by that cav. I'm using the square marker here on top of the cav as a cav charged marker. It does show up in the later, well, at least in the Spanish game. I don't want to dig through that counter mix, and this is working fine. There's not a lot of cav in this battle. I wanted to mention something else, which is this is one where I feel like there's good reason why this battle doesn't get played out in too many systems, in particular the Napoleonic Brigade series. But you also don't see it in those early SPI games, I don't think, and such. It's not a terribly compelling situation here. I think the game's doing the best that it can with this battle, but it's a withdrawal battle, a fighting withdrawal, and that's kind of a hard sale when you compare it to, like, you know, the Austerlitz and Borodino and other big cataclysmic battles where both sides really were trying to win the battle. And that's why the Austerlitz, the Gettysburg, these battles really stick out, is that they weren't a major battle that one side had decided not, you know, to fight all out on. You know, this is a major battle, but it's more a delaying action. And if we ever get to Victory Games 1809, which I have kicking around somewhere, up there, that handles the campaign in a very nice fashion. That's one of the Zucker designs, and I like that one. It's not as innovative as Struggle of Nations. It's more like his other designs, but yeah, it's a good game. John has finished cleaning up Unter Deckenbach, and you can see Davout has almost cleared the hill here. Yeah, there's an artillery piece here and some infantry here. This artillery is abandoned, and I probably can't try to defend it. I'm just too overwhelmed. I really should be getting off that hill before things get much worse. The units in column marching up here got struck. Not too bad an effect for them. It didn't really hurt them. Otherwise, French Lefebvre is ready to execute his orders, I believe. I mean, he's been executing. They've been to recover. This is a thing, you know, when it's very similar to my CWB games. I don't know whether or not I can give orders like, well, march forward, but do it cautiously. Do it so that you don't wear your troops out, you know. I really like giving orders like that. Advance at a steady pace or whatever. Just, you know, in this case, the fatigue is an issue. I want to recover from that. And, you know, you may or may not be using both those rules, but also there's recovering disordered units. If you're playing with just the orders chits, you can't do that. It becomes more like a musket and pike game where, you know, you have to throw yourself into different orders. But the orders chits don't really work that way. They work more like the written orders. They're things that are sent out to the commanders, and the commanders have to generally try to follow them. It's not like a commander in musket and pike rolling to see, hey, can I charge this turn? Or can I pull back to a regroup type thing so that I can try to do that? The intention's different, and honestly, I think more suitable for a Napoleonic era. I don't think a musket and pike type game would work well in the Napoleonic era, but I think it works wonderfully in the era that it's in. Anyway, that kicks us over to the Austrian side of turn 6. We have Lon pushing forces here. Now, these are heading to support an attack on Eckmühl that's never going to happen, I think. It's just the way I wrote my orders. And given that I wrote them after that attack had already been called off, you know, you're just seeing my schizophrenia probably more accurately representing bad orders, conflicts, and problems than you would see in an actual game. But I'm cool with that, actually. On 3 p.m. with only 4 turns left. The Austrians are basically disengaging as much as possible. Liechtenstein beginning to try to set himself up a force here, but you see Charles stumbling around in the woods. Hohenloh's force is now demoralized. He didn't suffer any losses from it. He only had a couple of units that he had to check, though. So, and well, here's the casualty piles, but they don't really tell the full story because some of the units, for example, Von Damme's units, certainly had replacement units in here, and they weren't removed. So it's not as bad for the Austrians as it looks. And remember, they have a 2-to-1 advantage in terms of the points, the way they're allocated. The main thing they want to do is prevent the French from exiting. And it looks like that the French are going to have a tough time doing it. They didn't move quickly enough to, maybe drive Liechtenstein back, which, of course, would be like the Van Damme situation. Meanwhile, I've got some delays here because of the bad orders that are going to be coming into play. Given what's here, an abandoned gun and some disordered units, we might be able to reasonably say, we don't have to support an attack on Eckmühl, it's done. And then we can go on to our next step, which is to advance road and trail towards the exit, clearing the path, so we could just start marching up this way. We can see that Eckmühl is not defended, so if anybody's got any desire to get in there, they will. And we could actually probably engage this way. So we may not even need new orders. Our orders may be fine. According to what I was talking about before, we got Lon pushing forward. And I really like calling him VlE better, but I know I'll get yelled at. Lefebvre is making his move onto the hill at this point. These forces, I can just ignore them. Hunting them down is not worth it. I need to crack through and make it through. I don't think I'll have the time, but in which case maybe I should hunt them down, because then they'd be kills instead of otherwise. There's some rallying going on here. Davout is, who I always want to call Ney, of course, is standing pat. He's recovering his forces before he moves forward. He's going to let Lefebvre take the main on the road, and then he'll support on Lefebvre's left. Meanwhile, Lon is going to be connecting up to the right, so we'll have the entire army smashing into one Austrian corps is the way we look at it. And if it folds as quickly as I think it will, or I think it might, we have a shot. But that I think it might, Liechtenstein, this is, see, it's called the reserve here, but I think this is what's often considered the advanced guard. Liechtenstein tends to be in charge of this, which is really high quality stuff, and it's all 10 morale. This is not stuff that's going to break easily, but with a whole army hitting it, I don't know. Students continue to attempt disengaging, and this system has always been troublesome for me to pull units out. It seems more difficult, any kind of fighting withdrawal or anything, than any other game that I am used to playing. It may be the focus on maneuver at the sort of very tactical level, much like the La Bataille games are. The thing is, I'm never convinced that it should be this harsh. I think most games handle it too easily, but this and most mini systems probably penalize you a little too much. Anyway, for whatever reason, this is a scenario where you're trying to do a fighting withdrawal through the whole scenario, and that, the system just does not allow that to be done at all easily. So it's a very, very painful situation. Again, my comfort with the tactical drills, etc. We're talking about actions at, say, the extreme range of musket range. You should be able to pull out with Napoleonic units at that range. But it's difficult, and you got your skirmishers and whatever, they broke units trying to withdraw. It's really, really hard. Right, well, French side of the 3:30 turn. See Lon pushing forward, knocked out a couple of units that were in the woods back there. Charles still trying to slip through. Cav pushing here. That's either going to force the Austrians to fall back and try to cover that, or they're at risk of either the Cav running off the map, making victory points that way, or attacking from the rear and degrading the position, all depending on how long it takes them to get through the woods. But the woods is not pleasant for them. They're not disordered from it, but they're in that general order, which is terrible. And let's see. If I'm not mistaken, I'm going to have to look that up because I see here infantry cav general order or disorganized. That might indicate that cav can't be in that without being disorganized, in which case I wouldn't have gone in there. I'll pull back. This unit running away, Lefebvre has taken the hill. At some cost, the artillery knocked a couple of units back as they tried to approach. And I guess that's about it. It looks like it's going to be really tough for the French to get anything over the ground. I got to check those calves, see if they make it back. They didn't want to charge up against these guns, and there's not a lot of other options. So maybe moving through the woods at a shorter, narrower point makes more sense, even if they disorder from it. But there's not enough time for them to rally, so no, it wouldn't. I'm not sure what those or disorganized parts are in here for. When I look up the cav in general order, it's mandatory in town, wood, brush, or castle. It's just to indicate that they aren't really cav. They aren't in an effective cav formation anymore, which isn't terrible. They can still move. It's slow, but so they'll continue doing what they did. At a fairly big distance, with the Austrians largely separated from Davout, it's really hard to disengage further. You have to be so careful. Either backing up or, going into column, marching away, and turning around and getting back into position. It's just really hard to get your forces so that they present a front. Now, some of that makes some sense, and like I said, so I think some other games play a little too fast and loose with movement, but this, it really is damned hard to disengage in this game, no matter what. And I felt like I had to cover the possible exit of those cav. Now, the Austrian cav have moved out over here to help prevent a move in this direction. I've got, some infantry, some artillery that have slowly been shifting. This is horse artillery, which is why it's able to move and limber up, move and unlimber, and get out of the way. But what it means is this artillery is facing the wrong way. I can only move one hex, I think. Not even. I think I could only limber. I mean, no, I was able to move a hex. I did a movement backwards. But it's just so damned painful to try to pull your forces out. And for that reason, this artillery is staying here. And you know what? Leaving units behind is really kind of potent because it was able to blast away some of the French and knock them back. And, it's just trying to extricate units like that from the situation. It's just impossible. And that's a pretty harsh situation. I mean, there's no path out of there, right? So, except through the woods, which the artillery can't go through. So just leaving it there to plunk away makes sense. Oh, I think I have. Not yet. Right? No, that was turn 8. Yeah, I got a chance to try to rally this poor thing. Not much of one. I rallied successfully something of 4th Corps back there. Yeah, that's not rallying. Guess we'll just keep running. Presumably about ready to start heating up again with Lon pushing into place here. Made a melee attack, which was repulsed. I was kind of hoping to blow these guys away and to take that space. I'm in a troublesome position fatigue-wise. Probably should have gotten Davout moving, but I held off another turn. His orders kind of seem to indicate that Lefebvre is supposed to be prepared for an attack. The cav swung over here, and actually there was a little engagement between disordered units in the woods that sent a French unit routing. it really doesn't look like the French are going to get anybody off board. We're setting up for a big cav battle here, but it's not going to really happen. I mean, there's going to be an engagement, I think, but it's not going to be decisive to the extent that somebody's going to be able to get off the board. Well, that the French are going to be able to get off the board, even if they win it. It's just not the time. They have one more move, you know, and so at this point, the French goal is cause casualties because they can't get anyone out in time. So to a large extent, I think the Austrians have kind of succeeded. The question is at what cost, you know. They've taken a lot more casualties, but I don't know if they've taken twice as many, which they'd have to, basically. So on the Austrian side, they tightened their defenses a little bit. Don't make any charges. Everything had to move, which means fatigue points increased, which sucks. But that tightening of defenses didn't quite work. Artillery fire broke the center near the crossroads there. It's not going to matter too much, but it does mean that that big artillery piece, well, somewhat smaller artillery piece after it had been charged, is no longer a real linchpin to the Austrian defense. And in fact, there's a hole there which can be exploited. There's definitely room to attack here against that column that doesn't look pleasant, but I had to rush units where I could. And Charles managed to rally one of these units down here in the woods. I don't know if it's going to have any effect. Certainly not in the major sense of things. We're kind of opening things up with Lon's cav charging. One goes in. Hey, it got countercharged. This was a hard choice because the Austrians have a bad situation either way. If they countercharge, they ended up on the 1 to 2 table. But if they don't countercharge, they don't get the larger strength. So they would have ended up on a worse table. So it seemed necessary. It would have just been a 3 to 2 if it had been the French countercharging the Austrians. But now, since they kind of bounced, the Austrians are still absolutely free. They're not, as far as I read the rules, they're not restricted with a, hey, I'm going to use these guys for charged. They're not restricted in terms of being unable to countercharge, which means I've got to send another charge in, and I don't know if I can do this here. If I do this here, I could get countercharged by 2 units, and that could be bad. On the other hand, I probably want to take the chance, even if I do that. French cav succeeds in driving the Austrians back, finally, on the least likely attack, actually. One where they got countercharged by both units, but they got the lucky die roll this time. But they can't really capitalize on it. They moved one remaining cav a little further, but they're not getting off the map. They're not able to charge. They're not able to do anything with it. So, it doesn't really serve any purpose. They didn't cause any casualties either, I don't think. I think they actually took a casualty to disorder the enemy, which is a painful thing of the melee table, is that, and it's reasonable, but it's that often you melee, you take the position, you break the enemy unit, but you're the one taking the greater casualties. And that's the advantage of defense type of concept in play, is that the casualties are so heavy against an assault. But you can take territory and you can degrade the unit so it's no longer effective, which is generally... It's an interesting dichotomy that you don't usually see in games. Usually, especially in the operational style stuff where it's just, hey, take a step loss or whatever. But in even in the more tactical stuff, usually you see a lot of damage happening on a successful assault to the defender because they're trying to represent the losses to cohesion in addition to the losses to the unit itself. Some systems probably could have handled it accurately. I'm thinking the NBS in particular could have handled it accurately by assigning more stragglers or whatever for the cohesion damage that's done and less actual casualties. But the casualties tend to be well, they still tend to favor the defender in that system in a nice sort of way, because fire happens first for the defense and such not. The melee itself doesn't actually cause much damage. But this seems to take a more radical or extreme view that the attacker's going to take the losses, just because of the granularity of the game more than anything else. It's less granular. The French don't really gain much. They made an assault here. They made an assault here against Charles. But the thing is, with a leader in play, you take a couple minuses on that melee table. In either case, Charles isn't bad in melee, and that threw it to a morale check. The Austrians are in open order, so they're not being outflanked or anything like that. They made their morale check with Charles there. They have like, I don't know, they had like a 10 or 11 to make. I rolled on an 11, but it may be a 10 just because I may not be counting the fatigue. I think I did. And now we go to the Austrian turn, and there really isn't much going on here. You know, the Austrians probably want to stand where they are in order to exchange fire more than anything else. But I'll go through the motions of moving them around. And now we're in the all too often situation. April 22nd here, 4:30, just ended, 5 p.m. Everybody's deeply engaged, and if this battle went a little further, the French would cause a significant amount more casualties. They wouldn't have been in quite such a rush either. The Austrians ran in, grabbed some guns, which they wouldn't have done. You know, there's this, oh wow, the scenario's ending, and it's 5 p.m., and it's probably still light enough that there would still be engagement at a fairly heavy level. And night fighting is not completely impossible either. Which is to say, when you have a situation like this, when forces are closely engaged, they don't just stop fighting and walk home and camp out for the day, you know. And there should be some additional turns, but that adds a level of complexity to a set of rules that this one doesn't really ask for. Now, obviously, with all you can patch it here, there, and everywhere with all these optional rules anyway, you could certainly make up your own little rules on the fly on this situation, and I would consider it in some cases. But other than the simple fact, see, here's the problem. I didn't know ahead of time that I was going to think about this. The problem is that I've already played to win, right, with the Austrians, like taking this gun, standing in place and trading fire. It might have made more sense to do a slight withdrawal if I'd known, hey, this might go on. I might end up surrounded and all of these units bagged or whatever. So, you know, like the edge of the map thing, the edge of the game often shows some weaknesses, and I feel like most systems don't address them terribly well. This one among them. So, I guess I'll just count up the victory points. There was a chance Charles could get caught. That might have been the difference, but that didn't happen, so I guess we move onward. Straight up loss comparison, this is a horrible situation for Napoleon. 70 losses for him, 67 for the Austrians. We multiply that by half. We're looking at, you know, quite a big swing here. If I can find where the victory conditions are. And 35 or so is standard victory. That's about where we are. But for the Austrians. And they managed to fight to a draw. Well, except for one thing. Out of those French 70, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 20, 24, 28, 32 were Vendôme, who was in a hopeless position, you know, just because of a bad die roll. So instead, we're looking at this, if we got rid of that, and we're looking at about a 5-point swing with the French taking still more losses. Now, Vendôme probably would have lost some units in that attack. you know, if he could have reformed and everything. He had some real problems there. He got hit pretty hard with that cav attack, and it would have been a struggle anyway. So I would say that this works out to be, you know, probably the casualties are more, should have been more along these lines. Up the French maybe by 5 more casualties, maybe a little bit more. And this is more what you're looking at, which is about a 10-point swing. That would be a minor victory for the Austrians. But instead, because he came on right at the edge of the map, the whole scenario is kind of screwed up. Now, is he always going to get screwed like that? No. He could come on at the edge of the map, not get hit hard by that cav again and again, and, you know, be able to undertake this attack fairly reasonably. And if that happens, you'd never see this. But you get the feeling this wasn't play tested very much, because that element would come up and someone would say, well, now that's just bogus, isn't it? And I think it is. Anyway, this is, out of elements of this series, this is one I would probably recommend the least out of what I've seen so far. Granted, I've only seen 2 boxed games so far, but, you know, out of all the Spanish scenarios, this one, it's an interesting situation, but it's not one that lends itself very well to a game. First of all, the Austrians are sort of destined to lose unless, you know, you count all of Von Damme as being destroyed because he's right at the edge of the world and falls off the cliff. You know, it's not a terribly, you know, it's this withdrawal battle. It's in a system that doesn't really allow fighting withdrawals to work very well at all, and I think skews it a little too far against the Austrians. It's not that it's an unfair competitive situation. It certainly is fair. It's just, as a battle, it's not terribly interesting on the simple fact that you're really just trading time for your casualties. And when you start adding in some of the quirky little things like the edge of the map thing, the edge of the scenario thing, you start to realize, well, this may be one of the weaker scenarios out there. It plays reasonably well, though, because the units have some separation with the French coming in from different directions, which is kind of nice. In this system, it's kind of nice when commands are kind of separated a little bit more. I find that more easier to cope with, because once they start getting jumbled together, they're hard to tell apart. I think the later games have some color banding to help you tell commands apart, but these early ones didn't bother with that, and so you're stuck trying to read the core designation, which isn't too bad. It's not as hard as reading the numeric designation usually, but it would be helpful if there was some color scheme. This is one that I would probably recommend, hey, maybe they'll re-release this as part of a package of 4 games or something, and then it might be interesting. But, you know, when you're paying whatever it is to hunt down one of these, and for me, I think this one was 50 euros plus shipping, you're probably overpaying, unless it's just for, you know, because you're like me and you want a collection of all the AWE stuff. All right, we'll send this one up.